Welcome to the FAFSA Leadership Lounge, where we dive into the policies shaping the work of Florida's school leaders. I'm Michelle White, Executive Director of the Florida Association of School Administrators.
And I'm Jessica Janasiewicz, lobbyist for FAFSA and several school districts across the state of Florida.
Well, Jessica, we finally have some movement on the sole reason we have a legislative session, the budget. The House and the Senate released most of their proposed appropriation bills and related documents on February 12th and 13th. And for a big picture look, the Senate's total budget proposal is $115 billion, and the House's proposal is $113.6 billion.
Woo! Now, $1.7 billion seems like a big difference between those two proposals, and it certainly is for anyone speaking in normal terms of dollars. But it isn't as dramatic when you think about we're looking at a $115 million or $113 million budget. 1.7 billion, and what's a billion here and there, right? When we're talking this much money. But there are some similarities and differences in both money and policy contained within those budgets. The House proposal provides about $380 million more in state funds for the FEFP than the Senate proposes. And you may wonder why this is. This is primarily due to the proposed House increase in the base student allocation, or BSA, as we call it, of $129.11. So the governor had proposed a $100 increase in the BSA. The House has gone above that with $129.11. The House also proposed an increase in the safe schools allocation, and a pretty dramatic one at that, of $158 million. That's quite an increase. The Senate, however, is proposing a more modest increase to the BSA of just $50, and they don't have any major increase to safe schools.
So a lot of the other categories in the budgets are pretty similar with a few exceptions. So the Senate allocates $30.4 million to regional consortia, while the House only has $1.75 million. The Teach Early Childhood Scholarship has $10 million recurring funding for both proposals, but the House has an additional $10 million in non-recurring funding. And the GATE Scholarship has $2 million for the Senate and $5 million for the House.
And also, the Senate's budget proposal includes some other provisions. First, they would separate the scholarship program from FEFP dollars. So right now, our dollars for traditional public schools and charter schools is commingled with the scholarship funds that, of course, then flow out. So they're following that recommendation from the audit that was done of the scholarship program, the DOE, and the scholarship funding organizations to separate those funds. The Senate also released a proposed conforming bill that went alongside their education budget. A conforming bill does exactly like what it sounds like it would do. It is a bill that amends statute to provide for specific changes in the GAA, or the General Appropriations. In the Senate's conforming bill, they propose a declining enrollment fund. So this bill, they set aside money in the GAA in our big budget, and then this bill has the language that says what we do with that money. In this case, they are proposing that we have a declining enrollment fund for traditional public schools. The idea is this: since the advent of the scholarship program, we really have not been able to do a good job of getting a handle on what students are going to be where. And most of the districts in the state of Florida have had less students to start the school year than they even were projected to. The problem there is this: a lot of decisions are made before school starts to ramp up for the appropriate number of students. Teachers are hired. There are decisions made about buses. I mean, you name it. And a lot of those things are difficult to walk back mid-year. You've just already staffed up and done certain things. So the idea here would be to have a fund that if a district came in and they were proposed to have 5,000 students and they only have 400 4,500 students, so there are 500 kids down. How do we help mitigate some of that loss? Because of course, when you have less students, you get less funding. So that fund would be there to try to help districts that are in this position. So that is something that the Senate is proposing. We'll see what the House chooses to do with it. They don't have any language like that anywhere. In fact, the House does not have a conforming bill at all as of right now. We have a long way to go in this process, and even though the House passed its version last week, the Speaker did warn in his remarks on the floor that negotiations with the Senate may be rocky, and we may have an extension to this legislative session. So we'll see what happens, and we'll keep you posted.
Absolutely. So we're also going to talk about some bills that had some movement last week. Florida is making some big waves in the AI world again. And this time we're talking about classrooms. Lawmakers push forward this huge, quote, AI Bill of Rights, Senate Bill 482, about how schools can use AI with students.
Under the new proposal, parents would have the right to opt their kids out of AI tools that are used for instruction. So if a school is using an AI tutor or writing assistant, they would have to notify parents, explain what it does, and then give them a chance to say, no, thank you. I do not want my student using that.
So what's really interesting is that the AI companies would also have some responsibilities in this bill. They have to give parents a dashboard so that they can actually see what their kids are doing inside these platforms. That's a big shift. It puts a lot more accountability on the tech companies themselves. And the companies would also have to tell you when you're interacting with AI instead of a human.
Absolutely. This all sounds a little bit similar to legislation that we had a couple of years ago surrounding social media companies, and the same kind of idea, providing more protections for our our kids. This is a big priority for Governor DeSantis. He's been pushing hard for state level AI protections, but there are some senators that are saying the impacts on kids are already showing. Some shared stories about how AI is affecting students' mental health or their ability to even think on their own. One senator even floated the idea of age limits for AI use with really young children.
So, Florida may now become a test case for how far a state can go in setting AI rules, especially in the classroom. The Senate's on board, the House is skeptical, and of course, the clock is ticking to the end of session.
Oh boy, is it ever. And we're seeing that across the board. There's just a lot of bills that are moving on one side, but not the other. At the end of week 6, I think there were three bills that are substantive that have passed, which is just crazy, if that tells you anything. Just wild.
Crazy.
So things need to get moving. We do have a Senate bill by Senator Simon that has had bipartisan support throughout its time moving through the process. It would allow public schools to increase compensation for high school coaches. That has come about because there have been schools in other states where coaches can get paid up to, and these are some of the comments that were made in committee, up to even like $200,000 just for their position as coach, not even if they're teaching or having other duties. That is what it's like in some other states. And so obviously the argument here has been that we are losing Florida coaches to other states for that very reason. The bill would allow booster raise funds to give coaches stipends and other performance-based incentives. The boosters, however, could not pay official salaries, so they would just be like a bonus structure. The bill is supported by the governor and some high-profile folks, some who even came to Tallahassee to support the bill. Coach Jimbo Fisher, NFL Hall of Famer Chris Carter were all on hand to support the bill when it was heard in committee. And its House companion, House Bill 731, is being heard on the House floor, so we'll see what happens.
Oh my goodness. So one bill too that's also making a last minute push in the Senate is Senate Bill 1062, which helps promote civil discourse and critical thinking skills for public school students and designates February 1st through this and it designates February 1st through the 7th as Florida Speech and Debate Week. The bill would add $2.4 million in recurring state funds to the Florida Debate Initiative. The initiative lost a lot of state funding in 2008, and it hasn't received any increases since then. Governor DeSantis is a big supporter of the bill, and of course, we'll see what happens over in the House. It's not moving as fast as it is in the Senate. It is in its second committee stop, and there's not a lot of time left for it to be heard.
That's right. That's an important thing to note. The clock is really something to watch now because it is used strategically by leadership in many ways. If they don't want a bill, or if they know that the other chamber really wants a bill and they want to negotiate, this is when the time crunch really matters. And we are now in week 7. So that means there are 3 full weeks left. But of course, we know if it all goes as normal, the budget is what is almost the complete focus for the last week or so of session. So the clock is ticking to really get some of these bills heard. And that makes bills like this, Senate Bill 7036, something that we definitely are going to keep our eyes on because it has our favorite title, education. And that
Oh my
means
gosh.
it is ripe to become a train bill. And in fact, this one kind of already is a train bill. It kind of was birthed as a train bill. But it will be a vehicle for some of these bills that are out there that have not made it fully through the process. It did get some attention this week, and there was language that would have let the state write and sell its own curriculum to school districts that was originally a part of the bill. There was a lot of pushback saying it could open doors for the state to write its own version of text, like Texas did. They have a blue bonnet curriculum. It has cost lots of money in Texas. There have been many issues surrounding it. I think there were even, I read somewhere, some copyright infringement issues that have been discovered. So that has become a little more controversial. And so that got a lot of attention when it was heard in committee, that particular portion of the bill.
Yeah, and speaking of some of those Texas issues, the concerns when it came out that the Texas Education Agency had to also correct around 4,200 errors. As a result of those concerns, the language, like you said, has been taken out of the book or out of the bill. Textbook publishers can stay in charge of the curriculum for now and not the state.
Yes, so that was a major change there. But there are still some provisions in the bill that remain. They're much less controversial than what were originally in there. There are things like modernizing dyslexia screening, letting schools have EpiPens on hand, making it easier for districts to declare an educational emergency. All those types of things are still in that bill, but that controversial piece about textbooks has been removed.
Yeah. And so really now we've got a train bill on either side, but they're both very different in what the content is. And this is where we can see some of those policy negotiations coming into play, especially as most of our education policy committees are done meeting. And so it's going to be budget for the next 3 weeks. It's still a really big bill to be focused on, that Senate bill. And we're not rewriting what kids are learning, and we're not writing that curriculum, but it's about fixing how schools operate day to day. It's moving very quickly, so we're going to keep an eye on it. And this has been our update for this week. We are so thankful for you all listening. We hope to continue to bring these updates each week. Let us know if there's particular topics or policies that you have questions on. You can always reach out to us. Head over to FASA.net and check out the Advocacy Center. And of course, stay tuned for more of the FASA Leadership Lounge.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lounge podcast presented by the Florida Association of School Administrators. Today's podcast was hosted by Michelle White and Jessica Janasiewicz. The podcast was produced by Jeff Willoughby. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. New episodes are released each Monday. For show topics, suggestions, questions, or comments, please email communications@fasa.net. We hope you enjoyed the show.